Yo soy de un campo pesquero que siempre rifo mi suerte. Por mi vida yo he jugado y a los riesgos les he ganado. Con mis 500 caballos a la ley he burlado. Son 2.500 libras que los gringos gozarán. En mi foro, bolsas y en la bolsa
I feel like as a filmmaker, what I really love is being able to look at something from a lot of different ways and kind of think about it in different ways, represent something visually and sonically. I feel like as a viewer of film, there's something very immersive, especially about the cinema experience, you know, as opposed to kind of watching at home or on your computer. But like, there's something about the collectivity, the way the dark room envelops you and how you kind of really fall into a film, you know, that's incredibly powerful. You know, I think about when I was shooting Otro, lado, which was my first feature documentary. I was shooting about 30 miles north of the border with the Civil Homeland Defense Group, and I was following Chris Simcox, who was like the head of the Civil Homeland Defense Group, and starting to think like, I'm wasting my time, this is really crazy, why am I doing this? You know, it felt pointless in a way. And then I was looking through the camera and walking, following his finger, and all of a sudden I saw these eyes looking back at me from a ditch in the ground. And it was a moment that really, I think, changed me, because I understood how powerful the camera is, how much I had to be very responsible and ethical with my use of it. And it was like a moment of conflict, because I didn't really know if I did the right thing or what I should do, if I should continue filming and be the filmmaker. And yet my camera was definitely intimidating and humiliating these people who were already being humiliated. It was making their reality worse. Yet it also seemed to provide the opportunity to give them a voice, which seemed important. So it just really brought up for me in a moment when I was filming kind of the real power, the conflict, you know, the kind of understanding really what having a camera means and the privilege and responsibility that entails. So I always think of that as like the moment that really marked me as a filmmaker. It's always different depending what I'm working on. So, for example, working on El Velador, I thought a lot about improvised jazz, you know, and how there's this kind of tension and release when you listen to the music that can make like the chaos that you can maybe feel listening to improvised music sometimes frustrating almost. But then if a melody or something recognizable comes in, you feel this kind of, this kind of release because something made sense or was understandable. And so it moves in a way that works with your emotions. And I'm not a musician, so this may be my way of experiencing the music, but that's what I thought about making El Velador. And I think with each film, there's kind of a medium or a certain artist, writer, or someone who's particularly important to me at that time. But I find being around different kinds of artists to be really important, you know, and not to kind of just be a filmmaker, you know, but to be in dialogue with writers and musicians and artists. And, you know, a place like the MacDowell Art Colony, for example, is an incredible place for that. You know, you're with people of all disciplines and they inform you and inspire you, and you can kind of compare art practices, and I think that's super important. I don't know why I make films. I mean, I think I love doing it. I love when I'm in the making of the film. I love when I'm shooting. I love editing. For me, that's when I really feel okay in the world, and the kind of noise and anxiety of life subsides in those moments. And I stop questioning. It just is, and it's fine. I hate the question of audience, and I think it's often because it comes up when you make film work that's not of the mainstream. I understand that's not why you're asking me now, but that's often why I get asked, like, who is this film for? It's usually a question that somebody who feels that the film isn't for them, either because it's in Spanish and it's subtitled, or it's about Mexico and they're not from Mexico, so why should they care? And I think that one of the most enriching things about my experience has been showing films to completely different audiences all over the world, showing them at home, showing them abroad, young people, older people, different, education levels, class levels, showing on public television and in museums and in festivals. Like, all of those audiences bring something different. And in their responses, I learned something about, how the way in which I have seen and portrayed something is perceived by different kinds of people. And that's the dialogue that really interests me, much more so than saying, like, oh, my films are to convince these people about this issue or to touch these people, And I think that when I look at art, it wasn't made for me, and that's the art I love. And so I think that's the idea. I don't think I ever decided that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I studied photography and I had an incredible teacher who really inspired me. I made a short film. I think I also work as a photographer, not meaning that it's not that I do camera and so I work as a photographer, but my way of thinking comes out of my background in photography in terms of framing, like what the frame means, what the image means, how we read an image, and so I think it's sort of happened more than anything, and I often attribute it to a kind of response to being bicultural and bilingual, where language becomes like unreliable in a way, and you're always thinking, in two languages, in two cultures, and they contradict each other, or they don't make sense together, or you feel like I express myself in English and therefore there's something I wish I could say in Spanish but I can't, right? And so language becomes this kind of fragile, unreliable method of communication, which makes the image much more concrete, and then you say, well, here's my image and it is what it is, and people can interpret and read it differently, but the image is there. And so I think that was maybe how I started to get interested in images. No, if you don't love it, don't do it. Yeah, and that's both the craft of filmmaking and what you make films about. I think it's really important to have a good cinema program, and what I say by that is like a theater like this that has good sound and good image quality and good programming and people who are writing about cinema. I think that's really important. I didn't study film, and I don't really believe that school is the place to learn craft, because especially now that technology is changing so quickly, we might be teaching students a lot of archaic methods, but I think it's important to learn how to look at images, to learn how to talk about images, to learn how to critique work, to learn how to listen to critique, to learn how to articulate your thoughts about an image. And I'm using image kind of shorthand for a film, a photograph, understanding what image does with sound and story. So it's just a kind of... so I think it's incredibly important in that way. I think the mistake is a little bit when it becomes too much about the industry or craft. So the drive of the program is, I'm going to teach you how to edit on a Final Cut Pro. And you're like, okay, and next year, Apple decided to eliminate Final Cut Pro and it no longer exists. So then you've graduated, a whole class of students who've paid all this money thinking they're going to come out with a marketable skill, and they don't have that skill. If those students had been taught conceptually how to edit, and given somehow like the confidence that they can figure things out, then it wouldn't matter that the technology changed because they could adapt. And I always think of like some of the great editors like Walter Murch, who is someone who began editing on a flatbed, and is still editing today, on films with huge effects and you know, on an Avid and completely digital and like this whole new world, and you think that person, you know, is an editor. He's not someone who knows a system. And so I think that's what we want to teach, is really how to think, you know, much more so than the craft.